Hey everybody, welcome back. We are back on the VTX1300. This will be, I think, part two. The first part, just to recap, I identified a bunch of vacuum, well, it's really just one central vacuum line that I can find at this point that were all toast. I mean, they're all cracked, falling apart, no good. And so I replaced all those. It ran better, but you see from the GoPro footage in the last episode, the last part, it still doesn't run well at all. So I finally have a notice that my carb kit for this is out for delivery. What I'm going to do is off camera, I'm going to finish taking this apart and getting the carburetor off. Not a whole lot to this one. You know, it's kind of crusty, so I'm worried a little bit about some frozen fasteners here. But anyway, we're going to take it apart. I don't know if I'm going to take this this adapter intake for this, Karakin thing off. I'm certain that comes with the Karakin. I don't remember that from the regular air box. I think that goes straight on there because I don't have a gasket. So we're going to leave that on and then, take it from there. So I'm going to go ahead and get it off, and then we'll come back when it's apart. I got the bottom one off. This is where the regular air box, there's a screw inside the air box that will go into this location right here. And I don't know where the other ones are. I think they just go into the back of the carb, actually. But anyway, take a look at this. Let me zoom up in here, and I just released these brackets, which fixture it more solidly to the carburetor boots. Take a look at that one back there. This is the main boot where it goes into that manifold. See that? You can see the carb boot actually flexing on the manifold. That's the main carb boot that comes right out to the carb. So let's put a screwdriver on it and see how tight it is, or not. Two quick things about at least this 05 here. This carburetor has a throttle positioning sensor. I'm assuming the 09 did too. I just don't remember, so we got to disconnect that. Now here's the enricher, or choke, if you want to call it that. This is pretty easy to get to if you want to take it off here, but you really don't need to. If you go on the other side, there's just a locking nut, kind of a pinch nut. And this pinch nut just holds it in this bracket. You see, like that. So all you got to do is loosen this pinch nut up and then just bring this with it. It's a lot easier to do it that way. It's not necessarily as easy to put it back in because this thing wants to get hung up when you push it through, but I'm sure this is an aftermarket knob. I mean, it's in perfect shape. I wouldn't think of replacing that. But anyway, I just wanted to show you that. You just take that out of the bracket and pull it through with the carb. Okay, another thing to show you. Right back there, you see where the light's showing, there's two hoses. You see the hose clamp there? Kind of hard to zoom up on it, but I'll try a little better. Yeah. Okay, there it is. See, there's one there and one to the left of it. Those are cooling lines. The real practical place to get these off is right there, although one of them is accessible. The one to your right, okay, the one to your right actually loops up and around on the top, and you can get at that pretty easy. The other one, not so much. So I'm just going to go ahead and take them off both there. That's what I've done before. And a little coolant will come out, but I made up a couple plugs to stick in the hose. But this, this is I think the essence of where the VTX name came from, because this is a very troubling exercise to get these carbs out, because of these stupid lines they got in there. So yeah, very troubling. Okay, folks, now this is crusty. Throttle cables were all stuck. Now I did take off one of the coolant lines up above. I said I was going to do them both from down here. That's what they look like down here. This one's a lot easier to get to when the carburetor is simply dislodged from the that intake manifold than this one is. So there is access above this. I'll show you that later. The spot on the top of, I guess it's that water bypass between two jugs, that we can leave this one on and just take it off there. But this one will be a lot easier to put on just by itself. So this will actually be a lot easier. I'm going to take it off, of course, clean this, but this is crusty as hell. Now, the problem with a carburetor like this is you got a TPS, a throttle positioning sensor. Otherwise, I'd want to put this into the ultrasonic. I still might. I don't think these are adjustable. There doesn't look like there's any adjustment on this TPS. I'll have to look it up in the service manual and see if there's an adjustment or set procedure. I kind of doubt it, but usually there is. It's certainly a test procedure. It's a resistance test, so I don't know. I'd really like to get this in the ultrasonic, strip it down, and give it a really good bath, but I don't know if that's going to be practical. So I will get back to you on that. So first thing I'm going to do is get the rest of this intake boot off. You can see inside there, I was kind of referencing this before. I think this is what it is. Let me get my light and show you. You got kind of streaks in there that are, it's just really hard to see on camera, especially with that light. You see them now? I think that's from the air leak. You can see some spotty carbonation right there. I think that's from this air leak. And so this thing was, really picking up a lean air charge. And then, getting a little pre-detonation with the popping. It's just running too lean. So we can fix that by just tightening the damn thing down. I really want to give this a good inspection, though. Make sure it's not cracked. And of course, we'll tighten down the other ones that go from that intake manifold into the jugs before we put this back together. My order of operations is a little bit different on this one. I'm going to go ahead and take the top off of the vacuum diaphragm. Thank you, and the carburetor slide here to get it out of the way because it's got these wings on it. I mean, hell, it looks like something from an episode of The Flying Nun. I mean, for crying out loud, these things are like flying around. I bet you if you threw it up in the air, it'd fly away. Never to come back. One could only hope. We'll get that slide out. Oh, I need another little container. Oh, by the way, on the carb holder on this bike, there is there's word. Where's my brain today? There's lettering here that says carb and up. So this is the carb side, and it goes up like that. Of course, you can tell by the notch because that's an alignment notch. So just keep that in mind. If you take one of these apart, look at it. If you take any of them apart on any bike, take a look at them, because you might have some delineation as to what side goes to what. Because there's a little difference in the way this thing is formed. The little ridges in here. Ruffles have ridges. And so, like Ruffles potato chips that say carb side, this one has that too. So just keep that in mind. To get the float bowl off, we have to disengage the arm from the throttle for the accelerator pump. Some of them on some carbs are just lined up to this arm and then push on it. There's a little flat on it like there is on this. But this one shares a connection where that actual arm goes down as part of an extension on the float bowl itself. Some carburetors with accelerator pumps, though, as I said, are not that way. You just take the float bowl off and that arm is actually part of the body. So, yeah, we'll pull this welcome back cotter pin out and then we'll get the rest of this taken apart. Let's take a look at the insides. I had a problem here with the this little pin, where the cotter pin goes through, the welcome back cotter pin. It was rusted in there, so it broke off. All you got to do is just run a drill bit through it, and it'll be fine. I'm not going to worry about it too much because that welcome back cotter pin's pretty soft compared to this. But this thing looks like it's been stored in the back of one of those trucks that salts the roads up in the Northeast. So this thing's like really corroded. But anyway, not a big deal. We'll solve that. Okay, so a couple of answers to questions here that I've had in my mind. First of all, this is it says factory on the side of the jet. That means it's a factory pro jet kit. It's kind of like a Dynajet. It's a competitor. So whenever they put this on, maybe at like a bike week or something, they would put a jet kit in. I don't know if they do it there or not. But anyway, this is the jet number is it says 185K. Now the stock jet size for this year, according to the service manual, is 195. So you'd have to say to yourself, if you got a performance intake and exhaust, why would you go with a smaller main jet? And the answer to that usually is because of the increased airflow. You got a lot more air coming through this Venturi, and so what's going to end up doing is that air is going to pick up more fuel at the same, general orifice size that you would have if you were, examining that particular orifice size under a certain airflow. So if you had the stock air jet in and you increased the airflow and the exhaust flow, in other words, uncorking the intake, it may be too rich because you're going to be pulling too much fuel because that jet size is bigger. So it's not uncommon or unheard of to have a slightly smaller main jet in a situation like this. It really depends on the bike. It depends on the situation. Two strokes are really classic about this. When you uncork those, it's very common to see smaller main jets in those carburetors. But I'm going to have to assume this is the proper one for this. And 185 in a factory pro may not be 185 like in a Cayenne or a Makini. This is a Cayenne car, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it is. And it may actually be equivalent to like a 195 or something like that. You can never really tell unless it's an OEM or you measure it up. So you take like a drill set, small drill set, but you need another jet as a reference. So if you had a 190 jet and you find the right drill bit to use essentially as a measuring pin, like a go-no-go gauge, and you put it in here and see if it's the same. If it's not, then you know it's a special size. I think Dynajet likes to do that too. Now the slow jet is this is definitely a Cayenne. It looks like a factory, not factory pro, but a OEM. Can you see? No. And so it is a 60, oh, I can't see it. 65? Yeah, it says 65. I think 55 it said was stock, so that would be something I would expect too. It wouldn't be unexpected to see a slightly smaller main and a bigger slow jet in this situation. I don't know yet. I mean, we got a lot of things going on this bike. Once we straighten out the issues that we see, do the carburetor, make sure it's tight in the carb holder, get everything hooked up, see how it runs, we're going to say that that is the appropriate jetting for this carb, and let's continue and get it all taken care of. All right? Oh, by the way, I did pull the TPMS, Jesus, the throttle positioning sensor, TPS. I looked up in the service data. There isn't a whole lot in there because my service manual copy is not complete, but it's real easy to take out. You don't got to take that security Torx out. It's just 2 Phillips. And there's a little piece that connects, like a little connector piece. I'll show you later. Or maybe not. Whatever. That goes between the TPS and the slot. So as long as you don't move that slot, it's going to pop back in where it was. And don't worry about this. There's usually a seal in there. So we are going to go ahead and immerse this because we got to clean this. We got to ultrasonically clean this. It's just too much of a mess. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, I like to roll the dice. I live on the edge. So let's give it a shot. Let's talk about the slow screw a little bit. On these Hondas, this is really classic to have the D-shaped or D-head screw for your slow screw. It's not a slot. Takes a special tool. Looks like that. This is out of my Motion Pro special carb adjuster tool, a little right angle deal. And so luckily it just fits into a quad. And then you can take this out. But what I want to do is I want to count the number of turns that was out already. Assuming this thing isn't frozen. It's not out at all. What the hell? That's weird. Unless it's really bound up. Now that's seating. Alright, let's just take it out. That could be another problem, folks. I tried adjusting this while the carburetor was in. It is really, 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 stop it! Really hard to do. Here's your screw. There is the spring. There's going to be a small washer and an O-ring in there. I usually just use a piece of wire that's bent over and go dig that out. So I'll take those out, set it aside. We'll talk a little bit about that more later on when we put it back together. This is that air cut diaphragm. This is what I'm thinking might be also part of our problem. But since the carb was so loose, I don't know, maybe not. There's a spring in here too. Let me put this down. We'll take it out, take a look at it. Like I said, I'll talk a little bit more about the slow screw later on. Inside of it. There's an orientation to it. It points toward the motor, so it just goes that way. Well, it doesn't look fried, but there's a bunch of gunk in there. I'll have to take a closer look at this, but that's that air cut diaphragm. Opens and closes. It would default to close because of the spring, but under high vacuum it would be opening up. Per the emissions of the time. So anyway, let's get the rest of this apart and then throw it in the ultrasonic. Okay, folks, here's the main car body. It's all done. I got the TPS back on. Unfortunately, the service manual copy that I have does not go above section 15, and section 17 is the ignition chapter, and I can't, test the TPS without those numbers. I'm going to keep looking online, see if I can find them. I did put it back in exactly the way it was, but I definitely want to meter this up per procedure if I can to make sure that it's functioning. This carb is too hard to get in and out to screw with that. The other thing that happened was I did end up taking this back section off. The reason why was, number one, it wouldn't fit in my ultrasonic with it on. Number two, take a look right there. That is your main jet, air jet. This is the main circuit air jet. Okay? When this is on there, you can see that that has a clearance built into it, or a hole built into it, for that air to be able to pass through there, right? Well, this was the gasket, which is now made of something. I mean, it's one time it was probably rubber. I don't know what it is now, but that area around this hole right there, this one right there, the hole that goes through, was all swelled up, and the rubber was nearly closing that hole off. So you definitely don't want that. So I ended up making a paper one. And if you want to see some videos about making paper gaskets, just look up Alan Millyard's channel over in the UK. And he does it a lot. So actually this would go, so it goes like that. You can see that that'll work fine. I don't have a really good hole punch for that size, so the holes are a little not as clean as I'd like them, but it'll work. Yeah, so now we got a nice paper gasket. We'll put all this back tomorrow because it's getting late in the day. I want to show you those two things. Oh yeah, and here's the float bowl. Float bowl came out really nice. Honda likes to use this adhesive on the O-rings, the float bowl O-rings, which is essentially a gasket. So sometimes that's stuck in there pretty good. I have found that a carb cleaner works good to dissolve it. What you do not want to do is go in here with a metal tool unless you absolutely have to. And you don't want to scratch that surface up right there. Any of these flat surfaces, that's a potential for fuel leaking. So I was lucky. I just took some carb cleaner and a plastic tool, went around and got it all out, and the ultrasonic took care of the rest of it. So we got to lubricate these pivot points for the accelerator pump, and essentially that'll all happen tomorrow when we pick it back up, and we'll get this thing back together and see how she runs. Okay folks, howdy, welcome back. It's the next day, and we're ready to move on with this job and hopefully get it done, get it running, and see how we did. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you the carburetor, which is all put back together, and go over a couple things regarding that. So she's all back together basically the way she was. I got that new gasket that I made in here, which worked out well. And I didn't do anything with the top of the, for the vacuum diaphragm, this cover. As far as the rest goes, I was really worried that if I started whacking this with a wire wheel or something, that it would actually leave a hole. Now I did flip it over and I filled it up with brake clean, because that's pretty thin. Gasoline works too, to see if it was seeping through, because that would indicate a pinhole, and it didn't do that. So we're going to have to leave that, because I don't want to mess with that and again have an issue that I created that now I have to fix. So like I said, everything's back hooked up. I did get that, I drilled out that broken welcome back cotter pin, and I got a new one in. Now if you need these little tiny ones for carb work, if you have like an Ace Hardware near you, Ace Hardware, at least in my area, stocks these in those little parts bins, parts drawers that they have. They have the little tiny brass ones and little tiny stainless ones and all sorts of things. So I get 10, 15 at a time. They're not cheap, but a couple bucks, $5-6 for about a dozen or so is whatever it is worth it because they work perfect for this. All right, so the accelerator pump's all back in. As we saw disassembling, there didn't appear to be anything wrong with the diaphragm, nor was there any on this air cut valve. And I got some new screws in it from the kit. Okay, so You may see some additional dangly bits on this carburetor, and this would be it right here. And what this is this is essentially a remote adjuster for the slow screw, because it is impossible, really almost impossible, to get at this slow screw, even with the special tools I have, with the carb in place. And I am not sure at all about this slow screw setting with this modified setup, with that big slow jet and that huge main jet, right? And plus, when I took it apart, as you saw, it wasn't open at all, maybe a 16th of a turn. So I'm thinking maybe somebody had to turn it way down because of that slow jet being so large. And it's going to save me a lot of time to adjust it, because again, it is almost impossible. Now, what I made this out of was a very small piece of cable, like a Speedo cable type thing. And it had two ends on it, and I'll show you what it came from. It came from this. Now what this is the remote adjustment on a 1989 ZX10 for the rear shock dampening. And that's one of the bikes I used to have that I sold. One of my customers actually owns it now, and I had to replace the rear shock in that, and it came with a new, a new, whatever you want to call this, a new cable, and the adjuster, and the whole bit. So I just kept this, and I usually keep old parts like this that have some, uniqueness to them, just in case I need it. So I just pulled it out inside there, and again, it has a square, just like a Speedo cable does, and a square and a shoulder up on this end. So what I did was I took that jet, and after I measured this, the largest diameter of the square was like 1/8 of an inch exactly. I took a numbered drill bit that was slightly smaller, drilled it out maybe 3/16 of an inch deep, and then followed it up with a reamer just to clean up that hole and get it to size. And then that slipped right in, and then I just touched it with a little bit of solder and soldered that in place. And then what I ended up doing on this end was I took an old, actually it's a float valve seat it's a Kawasaki float valve seat, and I drilled that out same way, and I put a little knurl on the end of it and made a little mark on it that I can actually feel. If I can't really see this too well, I'm not really sure how it's going to present itself once I get it in. And that way I can adjust it. Right now I have it set for 2 turns out. So I got the idea for this from somebody posted it on, I think, the original VTX1300, the 2009 series, that a place called Glenn's VTX makes these things. You can buy them. And I did look them up, I don't know, a while back, because I was just curious about it. And I thought to myself this morning, I said, I bet you I can make something like that, because I had just come across this piece when I was reorganizing, and I'm like, hey, wait, I know what that is. So that's what I did. And I just wrapped it up with some tape to kind of protect it a little bit. I would have liked to put like a rubber tube on it or some shrink tube, but I still had to solder this in. That would have had to go on first, and that would have been a real problem. It would have compromised my solder and would have started burning and so forth. So yeah, it works fine, as you can see. Like I said, I have it set for 2 turns. So that's the major change that I made to the carburetor, which I think is going to save me a lot of time in the long run. This maybe took me a half an hour to make. Seriously, it did not take me long to do it all. It didn't take long. So I just decided to do it. So, all right. So now you've been updated on the carb. I don't think there's anything else I need to show you. So I'm going to do, oh yeah, one other thing. There is one other thing. The throttle positioning sensor. I still cannot find accurate criteria, service or value criteria, resistance-wise for this. So I metered it up, and basically from what I can find, the little bit I can find online, it looks all right. So we're going to go with it, because when I put it back in, I didn't turn that sensor at all. I just lined it right back up with that there's a little connector piece that goes between the actual throttle shaft and the TPS. And so I just lined it up to where the slot was before. This is non-adjustable anyway. Can't turn it. So I don't even think there's any adjustment here. There might be when you loosen this safety Torx. But, if I had access to the correct data, which I just cannot find, because, again, those pages are missing in my service manual copy. And I've looked all over the internet. I cannot find any forum post or anything where somebody lists the procedure as far as which wires and what it should be at closed throttle and wide open throttle. I just can't find it. So we're going to have to kind of wing it on that one, I live on the edge, so let's just go with it. So off camera, I'm going to go ahead and put this back in completely, get everything hooked up, And when we fire it back up, I'll open the doors up because I got the AC on now, and we'll experience some 900 degree heat with 120% humidity. We'll get this thing fired up and see how we did. All right, folks, that worked out really well. Focus! Worked out really well. There's our knob. Can do a classic reach around underneath here and get at that. Got just a wire tie here just to hold on loosely but don't let go. And as I said before, we're at two turns in one. So we'll see how that works. Everything else is under the same conditions with the vacuum lines blocked off. This one, this extra one, which I don't know, may or may not get used someday. And the one for the fuel tap. I've already charged I've already charged it. I already charged the, what is that thing? The carburetor with fuel from the auxiliary gas can, suspended from the OSHA-approved auxiliary gas can suspender. And it's not leaking or overflowing. I did test that by blowing into it upside down before I put it together. Oh, I hurt myself. And I wasn't able to blow past it. But the flow level is not right. It's a little bit on the higher side, and it's not adjustable. So the only way around that is to replace the float, and I would have loved to have done that. But this is a extreme budget job. Otherwise, I would use OEM parts and everything. But anyway, I'm not here to rant. I'm here to ride. So I'm gonna get you set up. We'll open up the door and we'll give her a fire. Okay, same situation as before. I got you off the lapel so you can hear it. I'm going to turn the idle down just in case. You know, guys, somebody's got to say it. Release the Correckin'. Let's try no choke at this point. See what happens. Alrighty then, so hey, what do you think? I think she runs pretty good. I don't have any drips. I was checking in there with the flashlight to see if any of those ridiculous cooling lines were weeping or dripping. They're not. There's no fuel dripping out. It runs great, but the only way to tell for sure would be to get the tank on and take it for a shake, which we're going to do here in a couple minutes. Let it cool off a little bit, and then I'll do that. Go take a break, have some lunch, and then we'll take her out on the road. Get the GoPro fired up and see how it is. Naturally, we got to put these trim covers back on. I got them down there on a towel because this thing makes this lift vibrate pretty much like one of them beds in a $20 Roach Motel. So basically, we're going to get that done after it cools down a little bit. And like I said, we will pick it back up with some GoPro footage out on the road. It is hot today and humid, so I'm not going to do a whole lot, but you should get an idea, and I should get an idea if we definitely have 100% of a fix here.
Alright folks, somehow my audio got lost, so I'm going to have to overdub this last section. Sorry about that. What I'm essentially saying here is we definitely made an improvement. There's no decel popping. It has good acceleration, but when we do wide open throttle, not all the time, but for most of the time, we do get a little breaking up, which is indicative of a lean running condition. So I would suspect that that main jet may actually be a little bit too small. Now, we couldn't take care of that right now because unfortunately with this job, we're on a pretty strict budget. And so maybe in the future we can do that, but we're not going to be able to really do that until we get rid of that Karakin, that performance intake there, and then we can maybe do something different. The customer may want to go back to stock, I don't know. But either way, we'll probably be seeing this in the future to deal with that because, of the fact that when you go wide open throttle, it is definitely going a little bit lean. Another thing that may be beneficial for the customer to do is to replace the carb holders in their entirety, the ones that are on the sides that go from that manifold to the jugs, and also the ones that go, the one rather that goes to the main carb off the manifold, because they are old, they get crusty, they get a little bit stiff, and it's just kind of a good practice thing, and I don't believe they're terribly expensive. So that would be something I would suggest to him at that time if we ever saw this again, and we were taking the carb out to do some jetting or put another performance intake on, or the stock one or what have you. It doesn't really matter. I think we do it at that time. Another thing that I wanted to mention was while the tank was off, I just decided to check the coolant level and realized that the radiator cap wasn't even on all the way. So when I looked in there, I realized also that it was low on coolant and that the overflow tank was bone dry. So I added coolant to both of those so they're right where they're supposed to be. Customer was very appreciative of that because he had just had this service at a dealer not too long ago, and apparently they didn't do a terribly good job. So the net sum of this repair is that we completed what the customer wanted us to do and what was paying for us to do, and we got that straightened out where it runs really well. Yes, there's a couple of quirks in wide open throttle we have to deal with. Hopefully we'll see this again in the future to deal with those, but under the current setup, the way this thing is set up, is the best we can do at this time. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Consider subscribing, consider ringing the bell, like the video, and as always guys, don't just repair, restore. Thanks for watching.